Hey, I'm so excited to be here with a wonderful group of women that I have really come to respect and appreciate. This is my friend Nikki Sue and a group of widows that she has formed a friendship with. You've already heard from Nikki Sue on an earlier podcast, and she mentioned this fantastic group of women that she's been able to associate with. So I'd like to start by having each of you introduce yourselves. And Nikki Sue, why don't we start with you and introduce yourself, where you are in life now. Tell us a little bit about the husband that you lost, and go ahead.
Hi, I'm Nikki Sue, and I lost my husband 23 and a half years ago. He was 26 when he was killed. He was killed in a car accident. I had a 6-week-old baby at the time when he died. And I was single for quite a while, almost 5 years, and then remarried. And currently, I married a man with 5 children, so we blended a family with 6 kids. And currently married now, almost remarried 20 years, and we're empty nesters. Our youngest is 23, and so work and just living the empty nester life.
That's nice. And you told us quite a bit about Cameron before. He sounds like he was a really neat guy.
Yes, could make a friend in any room he'd walk into. So
wonderful. Yeah. Thank you. Rosemary, why don't we go next to you? Introduce yourself, please.
My name is Rosemary Hughes, and right now I'm working part-time teaching a social emotional learning class at an elementary school. Let's see. I just love being a grandma, and they're my hobbies. My grandkids. My husband's name was Greg. Sorry, I'll cry. He passed away 23 years ago, almost to the day today. He was awesome. He worked very hard to take care of our family, working 2 jobs. He was a mechanic for the LDS Church. He loved antique trucks and actually drove a 1942 Chevy around. So that's a little bit about Greg.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for sharing that, Rosemary. Appreciate that. Suzette, would you tell us about yourself?
My name is Suzette Kimball. I lost my husband, Steve. He was 33 and I was 32. We had just celebrated our 14th wedding anniversary. We had a 14-year-old, an 11-year-old, a 7-year-old, and our youngest had just turned 5. I feel very blessed that we completed a lot of our life before he passed. So many of the girls here were so young, and they got their lives ripped from them. Not that Rosemary didn't, but we were done having kids. We'd bought a house. I mean, we had achieved a lot of life goals. My husband was also a very hard worker. He thought he was very funny. He would do anything for anybody. And even though he worked sometimes 80 to 100 hours a week, he would never turn down anyone who asked for his help. So he was a special man.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Jenny, go next.
Sure. My name's Jenny Broadhead, and my husband his name was Steve, and he was an amazing man. He was super fun, loved the outdoors. He loved a good time. He was always in the middle of planning something in the midst of doing something else. He loved to camp and to hike and to snowmobile, and water ski and boat and jet ski and all the fun things. And he was always just looking for somebody to come play with him. Hard worker, but his favorite thing was his daughter, Allie. Every time he would come home, he'd run up our back steps and he'd just say, "Where's my little monkey?" And, when he came home, it was fun time with Dad. So when he passed away, our daughter was 23 months old, not quite 2, and I was pregnant with our second. And we had just found out that week that we were having another girl. So, he was killed in a snowmobiling avalanche, and I had about 4.5 months left of that pregnancy. And so it was kind of like one traumatic thing and then waiting for her birth. And then it was like starting over again. Now we take a deep breath and move on. So I have those 2 girls. I was single for about 4 years before I started dating, and I did remarry to a second Steve. So both my husbands are Steves. And he was a widower, and so he had 1 daughter. I had the 2. So we blended our family, and then we have 1 daughter together. So we have 4 daughters, and just created a beautiful life together. I feel really blessed.
Thank you. And Melissa?
Yes, my name is Melissa Person, and I married my high school sweetheart. We had been married for almost 7 years. I became a widow about 22 years ago. It will be 22 years this February 11th. I was 24 years old at the time when he passed away, with 2 young boys, a 5-year-old and not almost 2-year-old. He was 23 months old. And then I was 14 weeks pregnant with our daughter. And we didn't know that I was pregnant with a girl at the time, but we knew. And he was so excited to have a girl. So we were way excited. I grew up in Utah, and I met Jesse in high school my sophomore year, and got engaged and married right out of high school. I was 18 when I got married, 17 when I was engaged. And I moved to California for a relationship just briefly after my brother passed away. And that didn't work out, but I'm still out here in California. My kids are now 27, almost 24, 21. And my oldest made me a Lola, aka Grandma. And it's the best feeling in the whole wide world. And I do medical sales out here in California and have my real estate license, which kind of helped me. I did real estate in Utah when I lived there, which helped by being a single mom. It was not a 9-to-5 it was flexible to help raise my kids. Jesse was an amazing, amazing man. He was the Marine of the Year. He was very well recognized throughout the Marine Corps. He also worked for the local gas company, and he was killed in the company truck coming home from work. They still hold they have a plaque of him and a picture of him up in, Questar, but I think it's Dominion or something like that now. And they have it up in the office and for everybody to see and remember him. He loved history, anything history, military, he was all about. He was the platoon sergeant for his reserve unit and very well respected, a great leader, had a contagious laugh and smile. And I mean, he just brought joy to everybody. He loved his kids, everyone. And he worked with the young men's group, was a scoutmaster, and he didn't grow up in the outdoors until he met me. So it was fun. We, had a lot of dreams and things that we wanted to do, but, life happens in that. But he was my absolute best friend.
Thank you so much, all of you, for sharing. it's I know people can't see this, but I can see the glow, the absolute glow on your faces as you talk about these incredible men that you got to spend too short a time with. I understand how that feels about wishing you had more time. So thank you so much for sharing that. Now, you have a really unique connection, and it's something I've been so impressed with. I'd like Nikki Sue to address, how did you guys get connected? And then I would like to hear from each of you what you thought when she reached out.
We all met at different times. I think the first one was Jenny. It was shortly after my husband had been killed in a car accident, and I think I heard about Jenny's husband's accident on the news, and then I saw his obituary in the paper, and I saw that she was young, and I saw that she was expecting and had a young child. And when I read the obituary, my thought was like, she is hurting as much as I was hurting. And so for me, I just wanted to reach out and say, I know how you feel. Like, I know how you feel. I think when the class came of, I was a widow at 31, when you hear the word widow, you think of someone who's older. And I didn't know anybody who was a widow that was young. So to see that, I thought, oh my gosh, we have something in common. So I think I wrote Jenny a card and sent it to the funeral home. I don't know. And just said, hey, if you ever want to talk, here's my number. Would love to chat with you.
How'd you respond to that, Jenny?
Well, it actually came to my house. I remember getting it in the mail. So you must have done some really good stalking, because that was before the internet.
I was sleuthing.
And how old were you at this time, Jenny?
I was 27.
Okay.
And so I got this card in the mail, and she had written more than just, it was like, the inside, the back. She wrote a very thorough note to me. It was lovely. And I thought, who does this? Who does this? And now that I know Nikki Sue, I'm like, yes, of course she did. Nikki Sue is amazing. But yeah, when I first received the card, I thought, wow, that is really spectacular that somebody who I didn't know would find me and then reach out and just write something so lovely. And then I think she, said something along the lines, if you'd ever like to meet and chat, I would love it. And I thought, maybe at some point, but I think in the moment it was just a lot. And so I didn't really do anything with it right at the beginning. But I was touched that she had reached out, for sure.
So then what happened later? Did you actually contact her again and say, now I'm ready? Or Nikki Sue, did you pursue again and give her a little time and then say, let's try to get together again? How did that work? Because it could have happened that you just never reconnected.
Jenny, I think you reached out to me. I don't think I reached out
Okay.
again.
I honestly don't remember, because I feel like you may have reached out to me because it was like, we're getting a group together and just having kind of, you found some other people and we're going to get together and have like a widow's night. And I thought, yikes, that sounds awful. It sounds really depressing. I don't want to get together with a bunch of women and cry over our troubles.
Well, and I think in the meantime, I met Sydney. Sydney's there's two that's not part of our group that couldn't make it tonight, but I met Sydney because she is my sister-in-law's first cousin, and her husband had died. And so my sister-in-law reached out and said, hey, my cousin's husband passed away. I wonder if it's like your widow, their widow. Maybe you guys would have some connections. So I reached out to her. And then Sydney knew Michelle, who knew Suzette, right? Suzette?
No. Sorry.
Go ahead, Suzette.
Sorry, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I tried to mute myself and I wasn't sure if it had worked. Obviously it didn't.
You're good.
So I think I reached out to Sid.
Okay, maybe that's how.
Because
Sydney was the connection.
Sid lived just up the street from Michelle and I. And Michelle and Sid had gone to school together. And I moved into Michelle's ward after my husband died. Yep. And somehow, Nikki Sue, you and Michelle got connected. And then Michelle invited.
Yeah, through Sid.
Michelle invited me.
Don't remember.
I think Sid came along after. I do.
After?
I think Sid came along after at some point. I don't know.
So our initial group started, and we decided to go to this. There was like 4 or 5 of us, and we decided to go to this grieving class at the University of Utah. Melissa, were you with us at that time?
I was the last one.
No, I don't think you were. So we went to this grieving class. Then Rosemary comes, right, Rosemary?
So
Right.
Rosemary, you came to the class, and they met you at the class?
Yeah, that's how I met them. I was taking my kids up to Primary Children's Hospital for a grief group, grief support group for them. And one of the ladies came and talked to me and said, there's a widow support group that I think you need to go to. And all I could think is, I'm not going to sit around with 80 and 90-year-old women. They don't have anything in common with me. They're way older than me. And I just mentioned it to my mom. She said, just give it one try. And she came and picked me up, and I came, and it was great. And what was I going to say about that?
And you see these young women.
So I walk in, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I was the oldest one.
Rose and I are the oldest ones. And we were what,
not
like
very far.
34, 33 at the time. Not very old.
We're all the same age.
No, I was like 36 or 7.
So then how did we meet Melissa?
So
that was me again, stalking the obituaries.
I got a card in the mail. Yep, I got a card in the mail, and just explaining with what she went through and how she can relate and be a support, and that there's a group of widows and would love to talk to me and everything. And I read it, and she found me in the obituaries, looked my phone number up or my address in the white pages, and then she put her cell phone number for me to give her a call. And at first when I read it, I was still in this shock of mode and grief, and I was just like, who does this lady think she is? Like, she doesn't know what I'm going through. Our situations are not the same. Like, she has no clue. And I was kind of upset at first. I even remember saying to my mom, like, who does this lady think she is reaching out to me? And I was just like, then about 2 weeks later, after I calmed down and started thinking about it, I was like, you know what? Let me give her a call. I called her, and I will tell you, it's the first time I ever felt comfort. And at that moment, that's when I knew that I needed this. She invited me out with the widows group, and they were going out one time, and I met all the women. And it's just crazy when you're grieving, all types of thoughts go through your head, and you think you're crazy because sometimes you want to drive into a phone pole or a wall, or you pray that you and all your kids will die at the same time, and everybody just thinks you're crazy. And then when I came around these widows, they had the same thoughts, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not crazy. And it truly became the biggest blessing, and I'm so grateful to have these women in my life and the comfort that it brings, that I now will reach out to people that are grieving because I know how much it helped me.
That is the key, isn't it? That is amazing, that in that time when you needed that comfort, it was there, and your eyes are open, your heart is open, your understanding is open to things that had been a mystery before, wouldn't you say?
It's so true. And I look back at some of my stuff. I remember there's somebody in my ward, her husband died, and she told me something about, I'll be able to find someone. And I was like, Jesse's like the only one I'm ever going to marry. I'm never going to remarry again. And as I've gone through all these different things of grief, it's helped me kind of help others know what not to say and things like that. Like, don't bring up, you're going to find someone right away. Don't worry about it. There's timing to it all. And so it's been, it's helped me to help others.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. I love that you each had such a unique reaction. Maybe, do you think that's just based on your personalities or where you were at the time in your grief?
I would say so too, because I think there were some people, and you guys can comment to this, that you would reach out to and they were like, no, I'm good. They weren't ready. Or we would have some people that would come, some women that would come, and then they would come one or two times and then just not be there anymore. So I think it depended personality, their stage of grief. And
I also think, personality wise and what we needed. And also I feel like the hand of the Lord brought us together, honestly, because it wasn't something I was searching for, or it wasn't anything that I even thought that I needed, but he knew I needed it. He knew that I needed you all. And, I feel like sometimes we don't know ourselves until we're in the moment and it feels right. And like Nikki Sue said, we had women come and go and come and go. I mean, we were open to inviting anybody who wanted to be a part of our group, and sometimes they would come for a little bit and it wasn't what they needed, and they would kind of ebb and flow in and out, and some would come and would never see him again. But this core group of the 7 of us just stayed so tight.
Well, and do you think maybe that was because your personalities all mix really well? Because perhaps for some of those women, it was exactly what they needed for that period of time, to make that connection, to know they weren't alone, to see they weren't crazy for the thoughts. But then maybe they got to a point where they were ready to move on, but you guys were going to be friends anyway. Do you think there's anything to that?
I think so. I think, well, personally, I don't think everyone found my humor funny as I did. Because we all know I can be a bit crass. I mean, not everybody can turn around to the guys behind us at the play and say, "Oh yeah, our husbands died. That's why they're not here." I think that's funny, or on the boat. It was funny. That was funny.
They said, they turned around to us and said, "What, you guys? Where are your husbands? We had to come with our wives." And we just turned around and said,
they had to die to get away.
Oh, they were like, so they
were traumatized.
Yes. They just didn't know what to say.
Oh, I bet you they never asked that question again.
Yeah, that's right.
I think that's funny. I think that's funny. But I don't think, honestly, I think we found as we progressed in the years of our friendship and our grieving and raising our kids, that we didn't want to bring that fresh grief in.
Because you were moving like a wave kind of together.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it's just just painful. And just so painful, and it's still painful, and it's painful to watch someone else go through that, because you can't. Grief is the loneliest thing you'll ever be supported going through. Like you can have tons of support, but you have to find your own way through it. And we all did it differently, but enough. Anyways, as we progressed through that journey, it just became harder and harder to invite people in who were freshly experiencing that grief as well. And so that's kind of where we just kind of closed off to the 7 of us.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't expect to hear that. And so that's a very interesting point. Anybody have anything to comment or add to that?
I just remember one night we were up at, I think it was Melissa's house, and we had some of the newer widows there. And I think we were just kind of at the point where we could laugh again,
right?
But they weren't. And so that's how come we couldn't get, they just weren't where we were. And I think they were looking around like, these people are laughing, they're happy, So,
and not just that, I think some of us were dating and they couldn't fathom, how are they dating? I can't even imagine that, and I think some of that was just kind of too much for them as well.
These are really good points. So if somebody were listening and they were either fresh, new, like all of you were at one point, and they thought, I would like a support group, or if they were further down the road, I would really like a support group. How would you suggest them going about this? Because obviously it's been a huge benefit to the 7 of you. What would you tell somebody?
I think you can't be afraid to reach out, because for every 3 or 4 people I think you reach out to, you might make one friend, and the other 3 might not be interested at all. And you have to be okay with that. Like it's more about, I don't know, what I have to offer, some sort of insight to them, and what do I have to offer you, but it's up to you to take it, and you just have to keep trying, because it seems to go in, I don't know, it just seems to go in clusters. When it's happening to you, you are super in tune to it happening to other people. You hear about it, you read about it, and it can speak to you. I don't know.
That makes sense to me. Because it's true. When it's very fresh, you have one experience, and when you've gone through a little bit more time, you have another experience, and then when perhaps your kids get older or you do start dating, that's a very different experience than that fresh grief. Jenny and Melissa, I know you both wanted to say something.
Go ahead, Melissa.
I was just going to say, with my brother that passed away and my sister-in-law, the thing that's different with my timing and her timing is social media became a thing. So it's easier to get into widows groups and find widow groups. And I always encourage that to anybody that has lost a spouse, a child, a sibling. I would just encourage them to try to find something like that, because I would tell them how much it helped me immensely. I also, there's the book, it's called The Message, and I always would give that to somebody to read to help them comfort. And it's always brought comfort to me, and I've known that it's brought comfort to other people. So I would send a book, but then I just encourage them to really find that support, find some people, find that group. And with social media, like I was saying, it's so much easier to find.
Good point.
No more obituaries and white pages.
They don't have white pages anymore, and nobody has printed paper anymore. So
one thing I was thinking of is, don't feel bad if you don't make a connection right off. I remember the first time Nikki, Sue, and I got together with a group, and I don't think any of these girls were there at that time, but I remember there was somebody there that was super negative and just sitting in the grief really heavily, and it just was kind of like a black rain cloud in the group, and that's not what I needed. And so I thought, I'll give it one more chance. So if it's not the right fit for you, don't feel bad about moving on and trying to find somebody else. Just because you want to be in a group who is, if you're trying to, progress and kind of work through your grief and not sit in it so heavy, you need to be with a group of women who are going the same direction, I feel like, or the heaviness and the grief of somebody sitting in it a little bit darker, I think can bring you down when you don't want to be sitting in it so heavily. I don't know. Just don't be afraid to look for other people that are a better fit for you.
That's a very good point. And that is a lot of the self-care that you do have to take care of yourself mentally, physically, spiritually. And if somebody is sucking what tiny bit of life you have left in you, yeah, I can see why you might want to allow that person to just kind of drift out of your life and concentrate on those that are positive.
And not that you can't be a support to them, but if it's too much too often, then it is kind of a suck instead of, a draining experience instead of somebody lifting you up and being a help.
Right.
And that's what you want with a group, is a group of women to help in your journey. Right. And that's what these women were to me, is a huge help and a benefit.
It's remarkable. It's wonderful. Wonderful. So let's talk about your kids. Every one of you had children at this point. So every one of you had children who'd lost a father. How did this help you help them? Did you do things together with kids?
Yes, we did. Yep.
Tell me about that.
We went to Disneyland together. We took all of our kids.
Michelle and I shared a room that was full of ants. It was so exciting.
Wow.
I think one thing that Rosemary and Suzette had teenagers, right? Didn't you? And so they were kind of able to help each other. Maybe they can talk about that. I had a brand new baby. Melissa had a brand new baby. Jenny did. So our kids were younger, but still had their own grieving. So we just were in different stages, but we all helped each other. So it was also good to look to Rosemary and Suzette with them of how their kids were dealing with grief of what we may have to deal with as our kids.
And one thing that I did that helped my kids immensely and pretty much saved them. There's a nonprofit organization, a group therapy place in Utah called the Sharing Place. And it's amazing what they do for children. And it helped my kids immensely. In fact, when I get phone calls all the time. Hey, Melissa, what's the name of the place? My friend's husband just passed away, or where can the kids go? I get it all the time. And, I was trying to find a place out here in California for my kids to kind of continue it, but they don't have it like they do in Utah. And
what is this? What is this place? What happens there that is so special?
So the basement, they have a teen room, like a teen for teenagers. And then they have kids from a certain age. They have different age groups, and they go, I think it's twice a month. And with the kids, the younger kids, they have dress up. They have this padded room that they can go in there and let their aggression out. They have things that they can play and mold. They have art, all different things where they can communicate their trauma, their grief, and everything, and it helps them. And then in the teens group, it's more of them sitting in a circle and just talking amongst each other. And then the adults, the parents, go up into their own room and talk amongst each other. And that's helpful because, when someone's having a hard time with their child or something with this, they're able to, tell each other, hey, well, this worked for me. Maybe you might want to try that out. And that's, I think, how us widows, we did this as well when we were together, with Suzette and Rosemary, with their kids being older. When our kids started getting older, they were able to be like, hey, I remember my child going through that. This is something, a lot of support. And it helps when kids are around other kids that have lost a parent. It makes them feel they're not alone. And I remember the first time I introduced my son to, it might have been Kennedy, Nikki Sue's daughter. I was like, guess what? Her daddy died too. And I just remember my kids going, really? Oh, it's just that comfort.
Right. Because it's so hard for kids to feel like they're the only one experiencing something.
Yeah.
Yeah. My kids really just remember that. Like, there were other kids that were doing the same thing, or having to go through the same thing. And I did go to that talk. What was it called? The sharing place. Took my kids. The older two didn't really like it that much, but Brad, the younger one, he was 5 when his dad died. He loved it. And that's what, I was talking to him about this, and he can remember a sharing stick, and they would just pass it around the circle. And, when they wanted to talk and stuff. But mainly they were like, it was so nice to know that there were other kids that were going through the same thing.
I don't know that I don't know that I necessarily did such a great job at helping my kids through the grief part. Like, I was so grief stricken, but and they've all had times in their life where that grief comes back. But now they're adults and they try to work through it. They've all had to go to therapy at different times. They encourage each other to go to therapy and talk about they talk about amongst themselves about feeling that way. But I think I definitely could have improved on getting my kids help through that process.
Do you feel like part of that was an awareness thing as well? It's things are, we have social media now, like Melissa was saying, things are advertised online. At the time when you lost your husband, it would have been a little harder to find some of these resources, I think.
Yeah. I mean, we did go to therapy briefly, but I didn't put a really strong emphasis on it. And I look back and wish maybe I had emphasized that a little bit more. And I don't know. I don't know. It was harder to connect with those resources in the past than it clearly is now.
I understand that. When my husband's first wife passed away, he took the kids to art therapy, but he definitely did not understand it, because when we met and he started telling me about it, he said, I just didn't get it at all. They went and painted pictures, and he just could not wrap his mind around how that would be helpful for them, which I'm sure it was helpful for them. But, at that time, he just didn't really have much of an appreciation for that. And then when we got married, I just went full into mom mode. And I think I tried so hard to compensate for their loss that maybe bothered them sometimes. I think I wish I had known more about resources too, but did you have that experience? Did you ever feel like you had to be twice the mom to make up for the loss of dad?
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. Had the mom and the dad and the one giving the care and the love, but also being the one setting the boundaries and dishing out consequences. And it's just a lot. And you never know if you're doing the right thing, and questioning everything you do. And am I messing these kids up? Like, there's nobody there to bounce off. You're being too hard, you're being too soft. I mean, you just do the best you can, right?
Right.
It's hard. Just like Suzette was saying, I went through a really dark depression with it, and it affected my kids still to this day. And so, they not only lost their dad, but they lost their mom for a minute of time too. So they had to deal with different types of trauma and work through that, and the abandonment issues and everything. And, it's not easy trying to find a therapy place for your kids. I tried several and a lot of them didn't work. And then finally the sharing place was the first one that actually worked for my kids. And, my oldest son was 5 when Jesse died. And when the police came to the house to let me know that he was killed in a car accident, the first thing that my son says to me is, "Mom, does this mean I have to have a new dad?" So it's just crazy, the thoughts that go through our children's head through all this stuff. There was a point several months later, and who would have known a 5-year-old saying this, is he went to the kitchen and got a butter knife and told me he was going to slice his neck because he wanted to go live with his dad. Wow. What 5-year-old thinks of that, sees that?
Right.
So it's extremely hard, and it's extremely difficult, raising these kids on our own, dealing with our own grief, trying to work through their grief, and being the mom, the dad, the caretaker, the provider, the therapist, everything.
Right. Which just underscores again how special and important it was that you had each other. Because even if you didn't have the answers, at least you had the support of others who also didn't have all the answers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's times you just need a big hug. And these women hugged on me and I hugged on them.
Well, and what role did faith play in this process?
I was just going to say, when Steve died, I was in a really good place as far as my faith went. And I truly, truly felt the hand of the Lord raising my kids with me. And there were just times that I knew exactly what to say, exactly how to handle things, when to say no, when to say yes. And I promise you, it wasn't coming from me. I felt the Spirit with me a lot, all the time. But it's easy to look back at that now and see it. It wasn't that evident as you were going through it, but I was cognizant of it.
Anyone else have anything to share? Thank you, Suzette. Yeah, Jenny.
This is looking back, 22 years later, but I remember having great faith in the afterlife and having experiences where I knew God was with me and I knew my husband was aware of us. But I also felt like there was a moment in time where I had to choose, like, am I going to stay this path? Am I going to walk this path with God, or am I going to just do it myself? And I remember choosing God. And I feel like looking back, that choice allowed him to walk with me and be there with me. And just through that covenant of yoking myself with my Heavenly Father, I just see how I was led along. And like Suzette said, it was hard in the moment. It was, every day was hard. But I've also had times when it's almost like, do you remember those old commercials where it's like the drug commercial is like, this is your brain and it's an egg, and this is and it's like frying in the frying pan. It was I've had experiences like that where it's like, this is you with God. This is you when you were trying to do it on your own. Like, I've had those little moments of inspiration where it's been shown to me that, like, you stay the path. You hang on tight to those covenants. You hang on tight to God, and He will lead you along, even if it's hard in the moment. And I feel like looking back on those times, 22 years worth of kind of just putting one foot in front of the other. I'm grateful for that initial choice of hanging on and choosing to do this with God.
Yeah, Melissa, please.
Real quick with me, my faith has gone up and down, up and down. One minute I'm angry, the next minute I'm so thankful. And it's been a little bit of a whirlwind for me, but at the end of it all, I do believe that God has a plan, and that I've been assigned this mountain to show others that it can be moved, and that I have a purpose, and the things that I've been through is, to help others. And that's one thing I do know, that God has a plan for all of us.
I like that perspective. Rosemary, did you want to add something?
For me, I was angry for a little bit. But as time went on, my faith is what got me through. And I knew that Heavenly Father and Christ were there. I could just feel them. And somehow we've made it this far.
Yeah.
I think that as I look back at these women, though, when we were together, it allowed us an opportunity to question our faith, because we all knew how each other was feeling. And you were like, is this really real? Like, we think this, but does that make sense? Are we going to make it? Is God really there? And that's something that we were able to do together, is receive that strength that through our Savior, Jesus Christ, and Heavenly Father, we're going to make it. It's not going to be easy, but we're going to make it, of the strength. And I think all of us could say, because you've had people say, how did you make it through, right? And we're like, I don't know how we made it through. I don't know how. I mean, we're still trying to make it through, but we did. And the only way we did was the strength that we received, and a heavenly strength. Did you
ever observe times where one of you was questioning more than the other, or did you see the example of somebody else and that kind of helped you to keep going at times when you felt angry or isolated or not wanting to have a relationship with God? How did your interaction help you there?
I just have always felt that they're all really strong, and I just kind of held onto their shirt tails, I guess.
That's good.
I think we had different times, right? When some of us, we just felt despair, and that's where the others could buoy you up and love you, like Melissa said, just a hug and an arm around you when you needed it. And then we did the same for somebody else.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting, Melissa, how you described it as this mountain that God had given you to climb. And now I'm visualizing you not alone on that mountain, but that you have these sisters with you. You're climbing together.
Absolutely. I've always told people it takes a village to raise a village, or however that saying goes.
Yeah.
You need it. And you also need it as your friends to help you get through grief, especially for people that have lost a loved one. You need that support to help you get through. Just like people that are single parents, you need that support to help you raise that village. And
I feel like we were kids. We were kids when this happened. You were the village helping raise me.
Yes.
You guys were babies. You guys were just babies. You really were. Rose and I would look at each other and go, Oh, geez. Were we ever that young?
Well, we did.
Yeah.
Rose and I were the mothers of the group.
And that's one thing
Yeah.
I loved about all of us is we were different ages, and we all just I never really saw the age in us, and I loved it. I
Yeah.
loved learning from each and every one of them.
So Suzette and Rosemary, you were older in your 30s, right? How did their youth inspire you? What did you gain from being around these young girls in their 20s?
I just remember thinking, if they can do it, I can do it. Because they had a lot more to deal with being pregnant and new babies and all of that. They were very inspiring to me.
And their faith and their perseverance always impressed me. And I think I said something about this earlier, but it made me grateful for the 14 years that I'd had with my husband and the experiences we had been able to go through. That even though it was so short, it was a lot longer than some of these other ladies. And I always felt very grateful for that.
Yeah, you were fortunate that you'd had that time.
Yeah.
So, some of you have remarried. For those of you who have, at what point did you feel like maybe I can open my heart again?
It was quite a while for me.
Would you speak to that?
I did have people say to me, "It's okay, you're young, go get married again." And I was like, no way, that's not going to happen.
And that's a terrible thing to say to somebody when they're grieving.
Yeah, that's not something you should
because
say.
Your immediate thought is, no, thank you. I'd really like the one back that I lost.
Yeah. Right. So it was probably 3 or 4 years. And then I started kind of going to the singles dances, and it was horrible. And just Nikki Sue, she did it too. Anyway, just doing the online thing and all that. And then I just remember one day I'm like, I know where my husband is, and we're going to be together soon, hopefully, I just am not going to do this anymore. I'm done. And I think I was talking to Sydney on the phone, and she said, and she was already married, I believe, or was dating Micah. And she said, "Oh, I just have a feeling that you're going to find someone." And I was like, I'm done. I'm not going to even try anymore. And that weekend, I met my husband. So.
What was so
remember
fun
all these
is,
girls were, oh, go ahead, Melissa.
just real quick, what was so fun was hearing these girls when they would go on dates, and then they'd call you up and be like, "Oh my gosh, this and this." It was like the funnest. It was the funnest thing. I never experienced that. I was married right out of my high school, never got into the dating scene. So I actually learned how to date through them.
I didn't never think of that, so that's great.
I didn't either.
I remember these guys were all dating, and they're like, "Jenny, you should start dating too." And I was like, "Oh, heck no." But one thing that I remember thinking was kind of heading into, the possibility of dating is I needed to be okay with single the rest of my life. I felt like I needed to be good just on my own. I didn't think it was going to be healthy for me to expect to get remarried to have a new husband fix what was broken in me. I feel like I needed to all the way and be okay with my situation before I got into another relationship. So that was important for me. So I was a little bit behind these guys in the dating, but I remember they were all dating and like, "Jenny, you should get online." I'm like, "Oh, for heaven's sake, no way." Because that's when online dating was just first coming in, and I was like, that is so dangerous. No way. And they set up a profile for me on a dating website.
That's right. I
Like,
remember
oh,
that.
we'll just run this profile. Like,
Yep.
oh, geez.
You have to remember, Julie, some of our nights together would be online. That was great entertainment for us to see what options were out there, right? And then we would have a great time laughing. And one night we're like, Jenny, we're going to set you up a profile. That was entertainment for us when we didn't have all the other apps.
Well, they are the ones who actually got me online to date, because I would have never done it on my own. But that's how I met my husband. And that's the only way he was dating, because he was in like IT, and that's how he was meeting women. And so there'd be no way that we would have met otherwise. So I credit these women for my marriage today.
That's nice. And the new marriages have been happy ones.
Yeah.
How have you navigated the silent partner in your marriage? How has your husband navigated the fact that you have loved someone so deeply and you're loving again?
And still do.
I have to say that, it takes a special man to marry a widower. Widower or widow. They have an understanding that a lot of men didn't. I dated men who didn't want to marry a widower for different reasons. So they're just very understanding, and I don't know.
I think a lot of people don't realize that you can't even go to the temple and be married for time if you are marrying a man who's, say, divorced. Jenny and Steve were the exception because they're both widowed. But Rosemary and Charlie didn't get married in the temple. Nikki Sue and Bruce didn't get married in the temple. And when you go online and you're looking for an LDS man who upholds their priesthood, many of them say widows don't even look our way because we want a temple marriage. And that is, like Nikki Sue said, they have to have this higher understanding that God's gonna take care of that. It just will. And this is for me. I don't date. I have not dated very much. And I every time I think about it, I go online and I'm like, nope, I'm done. So 23 and a half years later, it's like, nope, I am. And it has been a journey. And what Jenny said about you had to find yourself. That was very important to me. I had to find who I was because I wasn't Steve and Suzette anymore. I just had to figure out who Suzette was. And I was married young and didn't really have time to know who I was as an adult before I was having children and getting married, because I did those in the wrong order. And I had a child and then I got married. So I didn't, I still, the whole dating thing just, but I do know who I am. I do know who I am, but I don't want a relationship to fix fix that for me.
Right. Yeah.
I just have to say one more thing too. I think that when someone dies, we're going to say our husbands, they're usually put on a pedestal, right?
Yep.
And that person that dies, that's why it takes a special man to be able to love. Does that make sense? To be in this relationship of this perfect husband?
Yes.
Who now?
Yes.
You forget
he really
about
wasn't perfect.
Did.
Right.
That's what they talk about. They talk about the good times, what a good person he was, and that's hard to live up to, right?
Right.
And for me as well,
Yes.
because I married a widower. And I've felt that, like, gosh, how do you measure up to this perfect person, right? I felt it, but
Yeah.
I just have to remember nobody's perfect. Not her, not Steve, not me. And I feel like it takes, like you were saying, it takes a level of maturity, you know, emotional and spiritual maturity to be able to live with that.
Well, and of course, my husband was widowed when we met, so I had those thoughts and feelings as well, because he had loved this woman. She was the mother of his children. And he always made me feel loved. We always had a genuine marriage, but it was when my second child was born that I truly felt like I could understand how he could love us both. Because I had that relationship with my first child that, most mothers think when the second one comes, I don't know how I could ever love another baby as much as I love this baby. And then this new baby comes and your heart just grows and expands. And I was able to understand for myself how he could have a relationship with one wife and then have a relationship with me. And so it is true. It is possible to love more than one person. And I wanted to speak to the very specific LDS theological angle that you brought up, Suzette, because this isn't the case for all Christians. We are unique in that we have this belief in eternal marriage, that when two people are sealed in a temple, that marriage lasts after this life. That's not all Christians' belief. I think most Christians believe that they will see their relatives again, that they'll recognize them and know them, but it's not universally understood. And so for us as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, when we marry in the temple, we have this expectation that we're going to be with that person forever. And that is why it's such a heavy topic for a man dating a woman who's widowed, because theologically they're wondering, where does that leave me? What does that mean? But of course, we know that God is so expansive and great that he never takes away or diminishes from what is good. He only ever expands. Things only ever grow. He is a creator. And for that reason, I feel so strongly, like Nikki Sue has expressed with her husband, Bruce, he's just never worried about it. His faith is such in the goodness of God that he's not worried about what that means. And
That's how my husband Charlie is too.
that's a great blessing too.
Yeah, and being in the dating scene, one thing that I really when I meet somebody, I talk about Jesse's family, and I see how their reaction is. And if their reaction is a little bit, I know that man's not for me. So,
yeah,
because it shows you how it's going to be with the whole thing, and how, because, with my kids, throughout all the years, I tell stories about their dad. Even to this day, they love to hear stories and see pictures and all that stuff. And I can't be with somebody that, you can't have that out, or, no. So, and I'm very close to Jesse's family, and they've got to be understanding, and they can be like they lost a son, and they're eager and excited to gain another son that comes into the picture. And my last fiance, he was very close to them, and they called him his son, and he called them dad. So, it can be a beautiful thing.
So you're still looking for that special guy.
I am still looking. I would love to marry a widower That would be my ideal. But one great thing though is I have some friends that have dated some widows, and I tell them they're the best thing because they know how to love. They know how short and fragile life can be. They know to not take things for granted. And even though you still can kind of do that in your everyday life or whatnot, you have an understanding of how fragile it be. And that love is like no other. And they'll ask me, their daughter's coming over. I get to meet their daughter. I said, ask the daughter about, you can talk about their mom if they want to or whatnot. Don't be standoffish about that, because if any guy came into my life and was just like I loved it when some guys that I dated would ask my kids, so, what did your dad like to do? I mean, that freaking melted my heart. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's not a taboo subject. These men that have.
And there's a lot of good men out there that are okay with, okay is not the word to say, but just, they will marry a widow or a widower, so it's nice. There's a lot of good men out there.
So don't give up hope if that's something that Suzette, and it's also totally fine to choose not to.
Yep.
Right. As Suzette
Definitely.
is. Yeah. So this has been a really wonderful discussion, and I have thoroughly enjoyed getting to know you ladies better. I just want to ask each of you one last question, and this is a question I ask all of my guests. What do you believe it means to grieve well? And why don't we start with you, Melissa?
What do I think it means to grieve well? One thing that I learned, my strength is my strength, and you can't beat yourself up. Grief does not have rules and everything on how to grieve. And you have to have an understanding that grief is different with everybody. So you can't tell someone you need to grieve like this. And I think really what makes grief well is unconditional love and understanding and support.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Jenny?
Oh, to grieve well, I feel like that means to feel it all. Feel the loneliness, the anger, the sadness, the hurt. I think it means to allow yourself to feel it all and sit in it, but don't stay there. Allow yourself the permission to be happy again and to become a better version of yourself for going through and surviving the hard days. And although grief kind of comes and goes and comes and goes, and you're good, and then you're back in it. And I feel like to grieve well is to allow yourself to feel it when it's there, but also to have the hope that you're going to get out of it and come out better than you were before, and allow yourself, give yourself permission to be happy again.
Thank you.
I would say that too. Just give yourself permission to be happy again. Because at first I was like, I can't smile, or I laughed and I was like, what am I doing? I'm laughing. I can't laugh, so just be kind to yourself.
Is that what you would say is grieving well, Rosemary?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anything that you want to add? Okay.
No.
Suzette, what do you think it means to grieve well?
I think grieving well means, to me, not to let grief define who you are, and to take the experiences that grief gives you and be better because of it. Be more, rise above it. But definitely you're going to have days where you are in bed wallowing in it. But then that you have to put that aside and move on.
Thank you. Nikki Sue.
I'd say ditto to what each of these women have said, because they've all grieved well. And I think the other thing is understanding that grieving doesn't end. Grieving goes on as long as you exist, and allowing yourself to grieve, even if it's 10 years or 15 or 20 or 30, that it's still going to come in ways, and that it's okay that we grieve, because it's all part of the human process of healing, is just grieving. And I would say grieving well is surrounding yourself, that we've talked about, with people that give you hope to grieve well and encouragement.
And that is exactly what you women have done. And you are such a great example of the power that comes in this collective experience this walk that you've chosen to take together. And I just thank you for spending your time and sharing your thoughts and your wisdom and your experience with me and anyone else who listens. So thank you very, very much, and wish you all very well.